to another episode of Q&A with S&A. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Shane.
And today we have a very, 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 very special guest with us. Please welcome Tristan Carter.
Hello.
Nice to have you here with us today, Tristan. Tell us why you are a very, 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 very special guest.
Well, over the summer, I qualified for the Olympics for Paris 2024.
Which is so exciting.
We
are so excited. I've got goosebumps.
And in what sport might that be?
Canoe slalom. Yes.
And what is canoe slalom for those people that might not be fully aware of what that actually means?
That's interesting. I didn't actually think about how
do you
describe
explain
the sport. Well, it's like, I guess the concept is like slalom skiing, except you're in a kayak and you're going down rapids instead of down snow hills.
Yep.
So yeah, you're just in a kayak and go through gate sequences down a river, and the aim is to get down as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Now, your canoe, which means you're kneeling in the boat, and you've got one paddle, so got one oar, I suppose, that goes on both. You move from one side to the other. I'm trying
Shane
to explain
being
it to
the
you.
like
I'm
armchair expert of canoe slalom.
So there is kayaking and there's canoeing. They're different, aren't they?
Yes. So there is, in the Olympics, we have two categories, and there's a male and female representative for both categories, and kayak is one of them, and that's more traditional, I'd say, where you're sitting and your legs are in front of you and you have two blades. And canoe, which is what I do, is when you're kneeling, so you're a bit higher in the boat and you only have one blade.
Yep. And representing Australia at the Olympics, how many Australian competitors are competing in the male competition that you're in for Australia? There's only one, isn't there?
Yeah, just one. Yeah,
yeah.
So it's pretty cutthroat.
That's where I was leading to.
Yeah.
So that qualifying process, in terms of getting to the Olympics, what did that entail? So I suppose maybe I'm jumping ahead of the.
You are. Let's let Tristan go back to the start for that.
Maybe that's where you should jump in.
It's a little confusing, isn't it? And I'll let the listeners know, we've got a child who paddles, so we kind of know the rules a bit, which is why Shane is jumping in with like a bit of the rules, because we kind of know as much as you can know without having actually sat in the kayak or a canoe yourself. It's a confusing sport to have to negotiate as an outsider, because there's a whole range of like point scores and things that you've got to do to actually get the spot that you've got. So it's not just like you show up and go, I'm going to paddle today and I become an Olympian. Tell us a little bit about it because it is confusing, what you have to go through as a paddler to get from just being your standard paddler for competition here in Australia to where you are now.
Well, I guess it's like any other athlete in any other sport. It's just years of dedication, really.
Yeah.
And honing the craft, I guess. I think this is my 18th year.
Wow.
I've been doing this for, so it's been a long time. And it's just, I don't really know much else what to say with it. Like, everyone knows what athletes do and like what their drives are and the effort they go to. It's no different from me, really.
Yeah. So when you're here in Australia, there's a place where you go to paddle, and it's really the only place that you can paddle here effectively for what you're competing against in Europe. Tell us a little bit about that, because we've got like one whitewater centre here, and then you go to Europe in the Australian off-season. And what is it like over there?
Yeah, well, we have the Penrith Whitewater Centre, which was the Sydney Olympics. It's the purpose-built whitewater centre for the Sydney Olympics, and that's sort of where our system is based now. So me originally being from Melbourne, eventually you have to move up there if you want to take that next step, and that's what you find most people do. So that's where I'm currently living at the moment. Yeah. Because, just the training facility there, all of the management's there, all of the coaches are there. So you kind of have to move there at some point. And then, we've only got the one here because it's not as big of a sport in Australia. So we've only got access to the one. But then you go to Europe, and our sport being a European-based sport, they have like at least 6 in every country. Like it's pretty crazy. You can just go wherever you want. There are venues everywhere. You can sort of pick and choose, and Yeah, it's pretty good because then you do the races in Europe and they're always in a different river.
Yeah.
And you get to go to a lot of different places, which is quite cool as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I think from that perspective, like, I'm not trying to minimise what other athletes do, but the fact that we only have one whitewater centre here in Australia means that everybody who wants to try and pursue professional whitewater paddling in this country has to really move to Penrith or go overseas. Whereas in Europe, access to water is a little different. You know, it's a bit not an easier road. I'm not going to say that because whitewater paddling is not easy no matter where you are.
Yeah.
But it's less, like, you don't have to leave your family. Like, you've had to leave your family to go and live in Penrith so that you can paddle enough to get yourself to an Olympic event, which is...
Yeah, I mean, it is hard
Yeah.
because we spend months and months away at a time and it's literally on the other side of the world. It's a long way and it does get hard. Like, I get homesick. I love Australia.
Yeah.
So I do get homesick, but I would say the biggest difference is their access to competition.
Mm-hmm.
So in Australia, we're such a small community and we're really just ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're just competing amongst each other, whereas the Europeans, they can go and just do like a local race and they've got the top 20 best in the world all there as well. And just from a very young age, like, they could be 13, 14 years old and they're already competing against world champions and just really big names in the sport.
Yeah.
And they can do that almost weekly.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a bit difficult for us to do that. So
Yeah,
I think that's where the
exactly.
biggest gap is for us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the equipment that you use, it's not readily portable. So tell us a little bit about how, because you need a boat and it needs to fit you. So there's all of that. So talk us through how you fit yourself in a boat firstly, and then what do you do when you've got to take it places?
Yeah, all of our boats are custom. Really, they're custom made for our weight and our body shape, I guess. So we're very particular about the boats, and it's someone else can't just jump in it and feel good. Transport is extremely difficult because they're 3.5 meters long. Like, they're really long, often quite heavy as well because we've got a lot of gear in them as well, and often aircrafts don't really fit them, and they don't want to take them.
Yeah,
and
They don't treat them well either. Yes.
It's always very stressful going overseas because everyone's had a story where they rock up in Europe ready to race and their boat's been snapped in half or something from an airplane. So it's always a risk you have to take.
Yeah.
But it's stressful.
Yeah.
And it's difficult trying to get them on planes sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get into kayaking and canoeing? You said it's been 18 years, but where did it all start?
I was about 8 years old, and my sister Chelsea was involved in Rapidly to London, I think it was called, and that was a project that Warwick Draper, another 3-time Olympian from Melbourne, he set up to try and get some kids into the sport, and hopefully in the future get some Olympians out of it.
Yeah.
And fun fact, Tim Anderson, the guy who I got qualified with, he's doing kayak. He was a part of that program. So
Wow.
it was a success, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes, in the long run it was. But yeah, she got into that and I was just restless and I hate just sitting on the bank. So I just started dabbling a little bit and floating around, and yes, I was having fun, so I stuck with it.
Yeah. I'm assuming that happened at what we have as our Melbourne-based whitewater centre, which is kind of, I'm giggling because it says whitewater is what you can get when you're sort of, 15 kilometres from the CBD and there's not really a lot of rapids. But tell us a little bit about that, because for kids who might be listening and might be thinking to themselves, I'd love to go to the Olympics one day and I want to do a sport that is a little bit unusual. It's actually a really good opportunity, isn't it? Like, it's a cool program to do, and it's not you can get into it pretty easily.
Yeah. There's so much opportunity in it, and especially here in Melbourne, I feel very grateful that I grew up learning this sport where I did in Melbourne and with the people that I did, because whilst we don't have the best facilities down here, we don't, as you said, we don't really have a whitewater centre.
Yeah.
But the attitude's just great. We make the most of what we have. So we train down at Templestowe. We train sometimes in what's it called? Darts Falls. Where's that?
Darts Falls up in Collingwood.
Collingwood, yeah. And Eildon as well, which is hour and a half north. I like the attitude of just making the most of the opportunities we have, and the people just enjoy every moment of it. And we almost don't necessarily need a whitewater course sometimes because of that. Yeah. And it was great, and we produce great paddlers too.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Victorian representation in the senior teams and the under 23 teams.
Yeah.
So, whatever we're doing, it works.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the community of the paddling community, I think, is a really key element of it. And your family have been part of it as well, in terms of you can't have a child who paddles. I know that even though you're the paddler, you're the child of it. You can't have a child who paddles without parental involvement. It's one of those things where you can't get your boat anywhere. You couldn't, as an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old or whatever, you couldn't get your boat anywhere without mum or dad hoiking it on the roof of the car and driving you to wherever it was. So the community around paddling, as you said, the people that have taken you from where you were as a junior having a paddle on a Sunday morning probably to where you are now, it's a big element in it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, my parents 100%. They've always been my biggest sponsors when I was younger, and now they're my biggest cheerleaders. So they've always been huge. But I mean, obviously before I could drive, I had to rely on my parents to take me places, and I think my mum was actually. It was probably good for me, but my mum never actually helped me with anything.
Yeah,
okay. No, you want to kayak? You put your own boat on the roof. So, I like that attitude though.
Yeah,
definitely. It made me grow up into a better person. So
yeah.
And the Templestowe location is on the Yarra, underneath the Westerfolds Park Bridge. Yeah. Fitzsimmons Lane, I think it is.
Yeah.
Fitzsimmons Lane. So if anyone wants to check it out, that's where they can see what the facilities look like. And they're
the facilities.
Yes,
I like that.
Right.
That's a stretch.
It's correct.
There is a sign up there, isn't
There's
there,
a
that
sign
says
there now.
the official
It's
training.
official.
Yeah, it's correct.
Official.
It is official. But it's a great stepping stone though into what you're doing, because it is quite. It's not difficult.
Yeah. I think that's what it is as well.
So if anyone is interested, it's a great way to get into the sport. And there's lots of support.
Yeah.
So
it's a great place to get fundamentals down, which is why I think you see such strong representation from this state, is because we're almost forced to focus on the fundamentals for so long before you take trips up to Penrith, and then by the time you get to Penrith, you're pretty solid already, and then you just build off that.
Yeah,
it's good.
Now back to the qualifying for the Olympics. So that day earlier this year, the qualifying event.
Yeah.
How were you feeling at the start gate when you're about to paddle to try and qualify to represent Australia? What were your feelings at that point?
Everything you'd imagine, I suppose. We had a few races before that, and it was leading into that final race that we were all pretty much even. And it was pretty much whoever won that last race was the one who got to go, which, as stressed as I was, you wouldn't have it any other way. That's how you'd want it. And I remember sitting there before the final run, and I could hear the commentators, they're saying, because I was the last off out of the group, and I could hear as they went down the times that they were doing. Yeah. And they were pretty good times. They didn't make it easy for me. So I heard Brody, he went down, did a good time. Kaylin went down next, beat him, did a better time. Yeah. And I knew what I had to do. I knew I had to do a really good run, which again is that you wouldn't have it any other way. It you get to the bottom and you feel better. You feel like you've earned it. Yeah. I don't think I've ever felt like that before a race before. It was pretty crazy.
So once you start paddling, you start the paddle, does all that, it's just, right, this is what I've just got to do? You're focused on each gate and where you've got to line up the boat. Any thoughts while you're going down the course in terms of I've got to push harder, or gee, I wonder what my time is at the moment, or anything like that?
You try and not think about that sort of stuff. I'm sure you've heard of like flow state and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's where we try. It's where we try and sit. I guess almost in times of such stress, it's easier to get into flow state. Well, that's what I found on that day anyway, because you do all the preparing beforehand, and by the time you're there, you should already know what you have to do.
Yeah.
And I told my coach when I finished the race, I got to the bottom, and I don't know if it was flow state or something else, but it almost felt spiritual in the fact that I don't know who was paddling that boat on that run, but it didn't feel like it was me.
Yeah, okay.
Because I got off and I could not remember what I did.
Yeah.
Which I haven't had that feeling before.
Okay.
Normally you can kind of recall the run that you just did, but that one, you couldn't recall it at all. I had to watch it again to remember what I did.
So did you have a feeling straight afterwards that you
had done
enough, or you had to wait to see what that or can you see the time straight away after the run?
Yeah, you can see the time. So I knew what I had to beat, and when I crossed the finish line, I sort of snapped out of that flow state, if you will. And I saw the time, and I saw that it was in first place, and that was a pretty overwhelming feeling.
Yeah,
when I was floating down into the bottom pond.
Yeah.
Pretty overwhelming.
And with this sport, going through the gates, there's such a fine margin in terms of, because if you touch a gate, it's a 2-second penalty, which can have a major impact on your overall time. Yeah. But then if you miss a gate, what's the penalty for missing a gate?
It's pretty much game over, that one. Yeah. It's a 50-second penality if you miss
brutal.
a gate. So it's brutal. But even in the modern day, the way the modern day sport works, it's even 2 seconds is... Yeah. Because I won that race, that last race, but I won it by 0.01 second. Mm. So 2 seconds is a lot when you're talking about hundredths of a second. Yeah.
And that fine line between how close you get to the gates as well.
Yeah.
You
go pretty close to the gates. Yes. Yeah, you have to.
We watch, when we watch it, because we know what the rules are kind of and all of that sort of stuff. We watch and we are like screaming and like, oh my gosh, it's so close. And, we're like, oh, was that too close and stuff like that. So it's pretty stressful margin, when you watch it. I would suggest that if anybody's listening and they've never watched a race for slalom paddling, that watch it, because it really is a very exhilarating thing to watch when you've got the best paddlers in the world. I mean, like, I'm used to sitting watching Emily paddle, and she's more of a like recreational paddler, and it's all a bit of fun and it's quite slow, and then you watch people roll their boats and stuff, and that adds to the fun of it. But when you guys are paddling, when you're at the top of your game like you are, it is like, it's really exciting to watch, because there's, as you said, there could be 0.01 seconds between the person who wins and the person who comes second, and it can happen any time as well, can't it? Like someone in the middle of the competition can throw an absolutely amazing run down a course, and everyone's sitting there going, oh my gosh, that's going to be a super time to beat. And
it's very exciting to watch. I think it's a great sport. It's so upbeat, so fast, so very fast paced. And I mean, there's plenty of places you can watch any races. Like if you just go on YouTube, we've got all of the races on there. You've got a bunch of people, they make videos, and you can just look at, just training or racing or anything. There's so much footage out there. It's good to watch.
Some of the I know that the news crews love it when the paddlers are out at Dights Falls, because when, there's a lot of rain in Melbourne and Dights Falls turns into like crazy wild whitewater centre. And the Melbourne paddlers are all like, and they're all down there and having a good time. And it is, people will often, I know like members of the public are like, that's really dangerous, and it's showing a really bad, thing for, but those kids, they're not all kids that are paddling. The kids that go down to Dights Falls, they're like our top Victorian paddlers. The ones who are not quite so good, it's pretty well supervised, isn't it? Like nobody's going to let a 12-year-old who doesn't know how to paddle get in that sort of water.
Yeah,
the
as
community
much as
is
people
pretty,
don't understand, we do have risk assessment. Like we're not letting juniors onto that, and it is the people that know how to handle it. It's like you wouldn't jump off a building if you didn't know how to use a parachute. People think it's insane, but as I said, I've been doing this for 18 years. And that's what people don't realize. It's you're trained, you get good enough at risk assessment. It's fine, and no bad publicity is still publicity. So it's not necessarily bad. Get on all the Facebook groups and everything.
So we're now almost at the end of March. So Olympics are in July. So what's the process between now and the Olympics in July? What's the training regime or the preparation required?
We had a pretty big fitness block after the race happened. And now I'm in a little bit of a softer block. So I'm going down to Tasmania, and we'll do a nationals race there. And then I'll be back in Sydney, and then I'm back into a pretty hard block again. So that's all fitness really. That's just tuning the body up and getting really fit. And then we go back, I think mid-May to Europe, and we'll have a few training camps on the course itself to get used to it again. And then we've got a few World Cups, which we're going to use as sort of warm-up races just to make sure everything's working well. And then we go back to another big training camp in Paris on the course itself again. And then we stay there throughout the whole lead up into the end of July.
And you've paddled on the course recently. And your thoughts on it weren't that great at the time, but how do you find the course?
It's I'll say unique. It's a very unique course. It's not quite like anything else that you'd normally paddle. We have raced and trained on it quite a few times already. For example, last year we had the last World Cup 5 was at Paris on the course. They used that as the test event. They often change the configuration of the water. So the bollards that create the rapids, they can move those to make different waves or different features, and they sort of like to tinker a lot with the configuration of it, and sometimes it becomes more unique. Sometimes it's
But you hope that to make it more enjoyable, you're hoping they'll do some change in the configuration to what it was recently that you paddled.
I'm interested to see what they do, and especially with the feedback that I've heard they've gotten already. Pretty much everyone. I'm hoping they come with something, but if it doesn't, we're going to have to get used to it either way. Everyone's in the same boat.
That's it. Exactly.
Whatever it is, that's what we're going to have to race on.
And do you know how many actual competitors are there in your competition for in the Olympics? Do you know?
I think there's normally like mid-20s. I want to say.
Okay.
I don't really know, because I know there's a set amount of quotas. I just don't know what that number is. I think it's like 24 maybe.
Okay.
25.
Yeah. And your event is early on in the Olympics as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you said to me that opening ceremony, and then the next morning is your first first run. Okay.
So that's going to have to be something that we try and deal with, and minimizes the effects of that. But so we go to the opening ceremony, and then I race the next morning at probably like 10 a.m.
Okay.
So it'll be a little bit of a late night, but it's not something I particularly want to miss. So
exactly. I think that's the point about it, isn't it, Tristan? That it's an experience. The whole thing is an experience. It's not just about I'm going there to race, and that's absolutely what you're there for. But the opening ceremony is something that most people don't get to experience ever in their lifetime, and it's a really important part of the whole overall experience for you, and I guess the ability for you to then come back and give the experience to others. And because obviously when you get to that point in your career and you've been an Olympian, and then you you become a more sought after person in the community generally for paddlers. There'll be lots of people who say, oh, we want Tristan Carter to be our coach because he's been to the Olympics, and that makes, it's a big thing. The kids in Melbourne all had the experience of having an Olympian as their, first experience with a coach in canoe slalom. So it is a thing. Like most of the coaches have paddled and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the whole overall Olympic experience, people are going to be saying to you, oh, what was the opening ceremony like? They'll be probably less saying to you, oh, what was it like to race? And, years down the track it'll be, oh, how was it to be at the opening ceremony? Like, what was that experience like? So
I had all the same experiences. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, it was, Jackie Lawrence, Warwick Draper, Mark Bellafiore, like all these guys that when I was a little kid, I was like, whoa.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing.
I
was like, wow, it's so cool. Like all the glitz and the glamour around it, the big event, the massive opening ceremony. It was really good to hear about. Yeah. So if I can pass that on and inspire other people,
exactly.
That'd be my job done.
Because there's not a lot of paddlers out there. Like, let's face it, the community is pretty small. It's not like little athletics where there's literally thousands of kids that do it. It's a pretty small community of people, and everybody really knows everybody else, don't they?
Yeah. Which is one cool thing about it. Like the fact that I can, like when I was younger, that Jackie Lawrence was a silver medalist at Beijing. And the fact that I knew her and I got to hold that medal.
Yeah, exactly.
Not something many people can often do, especially with the bigger sports, because those athletes are a lot more protected because they're a bit bit more of celebrities. But
exactly.
It is one cool thing about it, that you can be so chill and so close to someone who is so good.
Yeah.
And I think with a sport like yours, because it's not a big sport in terms of the Australian psyche and everything like that, you almost have a responsibility to promote it and use the Olympics as a tool to promote it, to bring that next generation through.
Yeah.
No pressure. No pressure at all, Tristan. Sorry.
Yeah, and I hope
How about you just get through the Olympics and paddle first, and then we'll worry about...
I would love to. That's what Jess does really well. I know a lot of people have heard of Jess Fox. She's a huge ambassador for our sport. She's the closest thing we have to a celebrity, really. She's really well known. She goes on like news and talk shows a lot. She gets around. She's a really good advocate for a lot of different things, and our sport is one of those. And it's good to have such a big image, and such a big personality representing our sport. And I'm not quite on the same level, but but if I can, like, one of my biggest goals has always been just to inspire other people. Like I see the young kids down here, and they get so excited when I come and paddle with them, and that makes me feel good, because that's what I want to do. It's always been a big goal. I've got my personal goals, but if I can inspire kids to come up the same path and do the same things and have the same drive, then that makes me happy.
Yeah. And it's actually a really beautiful sort of sport to do. I remember I wasn't the one who used to go and sit by Westerfolds every Sunday morning and, drag kayaks down to the start line so that Emily could compete in the Yarra series or something. But, there's a sausage sizzle and a cake stall, and, there's families that are really, even when their kids stop paddling, they still go down there and they're still manning the barbecue and stuff like that. And Westerfolds, that part of Westerfolds is a really beautiful, environmentally beautiful part of the world as well. So get up on a Sunday morning, go for a paddle along there. You do the same thing, I guess, up in at Penrith, where you can paddle along the Penrith River just for, a bit of flat water and stuff like that. I know Jess posts on her Instagram pretty frequently that she's, out there just for a Sunday morning paddle, because it's a meditative thing to do, and it's a beautiful environmental part of the world. So I think it's one of those things about the sport that you've chosen, or that chose you, that it's got something to offer from that respect as well. You're not indoors. You're not, it's just a really fresh air sort of good, feel-good sort of place to be.
Yeah, it is.
Except
good.
when you're like underneath the water and getting pummeled by main wave and Penrith. But
yeah, you do. That is the good thing about our sport. You do get to see some pretty incredible parts of the world.
Yeah,
because it's when we go and race in Europe, especially, we don't often go to the big cities. I mean, sometimes we do, like Paris is in the big city.
Yeah,
there's a few courses that are in the big cities, but this year, we've got a race in Le Serre de Gel, which probably no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
Which is just on the southern end of the Pyrenees, which is a stunning place of the world.
Yeah.
And you're racing underneath these huge mountains. And then we go to Ivrea, which is a little bit bigger of a city, but still probably no one's ever heard of it, which is in northern Italy. And it's just, you do really get to see some off the beaten track sort of places, and it's really cool. Yeah.
And even down to Tasmania and some of the
and Tassie, one of the best places in Australia. It's such a great place down there.
But quite remote in terms of getting to where the whitewater is in some.
Yes. Yeah. So Brady's where the race is for nationals. It's, if you look at a picture of Tasmania, if you point right in the middle, that's where it is. So there's nothing around it. It's on the Central Highlands, which is a huge plateau of mountains, and there's nothing around, but it's a really stunning place of the world. Yeah.
And hard to get to.
Yes, quite hard to get to.
Yeah. It's not a we'll just go down to Tassie for the weekend, because again, you've got to get your boats over. Yeah. Presumably going
Again,
on the Spirit of Tassie,
boats,
getting so it's a big community effort to get down there, isn't it? And
it is,
the same way as it is with most of the remote places that you go to in Europe, you kind of you're with 3 or 4 other paddlers, and you've all got your boats on the roof, and you're all sort of going from Airbnb to Airbnb, I guess, trying to
that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And that leads me to the question about funding and sponsorship, which is something that's probably a big deal, and one of the reasons why you're here with us today on the podcast, not only because you're an Olympian and you happen to be Chelsea's brother. Aintree Group sponsor you. We make a really small contribution to something that is a much bigger thing. It's not easy to be an athlete in a sport like canoe slalom, is it? Because you're not on the front cover of the magazines and all of that sort of stuff. So tell us about how important it is, and how much money you spend on all of the things that and how much of it comes out of your own pocket, Tristan. So.
Well, our sport naturally being very expensive, it can be quite difficult. And, these sponsorships and like what Aintree has done for me it's a massive help, and I appreciate it so much, because everything helps towards the journey. And it can be hard, because it's not like like any of the big sports that you see AFL players running around with 600k. It's not like that for us. And I understand how the world works. I understand why it is. It's such a small sport in Australia. We don't have the viewership numbers or anything. But it is how it is. So until we can get more eyes on the sport, this is just how it's going to be. And it can be difficult. We do get, because we are an Olympic sport, so we do get funding from the Australian sports commissions and stuff, which is good. That does help a lot. So if you make one of the big teams, like the senior team or something, if you're on that team and you're on that tour, they cover quite a bit of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But most of the time the equipment and everything's all self-funded, which it's very expensive. Yeah. All of our gear being customized, and so I don't really know how to say it, but it's like all carbon fiber. It's specialty made kind of. So it's very expensive, and you go through a lot of stuff as well. I go through like 3 paddles a year, which aren't cheap. Yeah. And you're usually buying a boat every 12 to 20 months. Yeah. So it's
And how much does a boat like yours cost?
If you picked it up in Europe, because the boat manufacturers are in Europe, so if you picked it up in Europe, you could probably get one for about 4,000 or 5,000. If you had to ship it to Australia, again, it's being a 3.5 meter boat, shipping is a lot. You'd probably be looking at about 7,000 or 8,000. So it's a lot. It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, isn't it? And not
Yeah.
only that, but because you are in Europe a lot, that's all pretty. I'd imagine, like, unless you're one of the team, that's all self-funded, isn't it?
Yeah, well, being on tour is only a small part of the year anyway, because we're away for, I think last year I was away for about 4 or 5 months total. So tour itself is only about maybe 6 weeks of that large amount of time.
Yeah.
So the rest of it's self-funded. So it adds up quick.
Yeah.
You end up spending a lot of money each year.
Yeah, and meanwhile you're not working because you're away for 5 months, so you can't work.
It is the difficult thing, but it's the path we've chosen.
Yeah,
but
of course.
It can get annoying when you almost want to progress in your career. I know a few of them are starting uni and they want to move on to, move up that ladder.
Yeah.
And they just can't, because you can't really get a full-time job and then spend 4 or 5 months away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it can be difficult to progress in life, but I guess it's the trade-off.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to sponsorship, and I know most athletes, and you are no different, it's really hard to say, can I please have some money?
Yes,
like it's hard to do
for
that.
Money. I hate asking for money.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you almost want to put a different hat on and just
exactly. And there's not a lot of support for that either, is there? Like in terms of, there's no, like, you can't go and do a course that's about, I'm an athlete and please sponsor me. Like, it'd be good if there's anybody out there listening, there is a definite market for, putting on some sort of course about how to market yourself as an athlete, because it is hard. And most athletes are not the sort of people that are happy talking about themselves and their achievements. No. So it makes the conversation tough.
We've got no idea how to do it.
Yeah. So where do you go? Well, like, who's your like target audience for sponsors when you're looking for sponsorship? Or do you just not have one? And fortunately for you, your sister is a marketing manager, so she's probably got a bit more of an idea.
Yeah, she's a bit more wide that way. But I mean, I'm one of the many athletes who just have no idea, because it is quite hard being from a sport that doesn't have viewership, and it can be difficult to sort of word it and frame it and in such a way that can convince sort of bigger companies that it's worthwhile having their logo associated with us. Because again, it's not like, you're not like a Nick Dacos who's everyone knows him.
Yes.
It's a little bit different, but it can be challenging, and I don't really have any answers. I have no idea how to do it, and I don't really have. I don't know.
Yeah. So as an Olympian now, how does that change all of that for you? Like, obviously there's elements of it that will be covered by Olympic stuff. But then as you said, you're going to go over to Europe and there'll be world championships and World Cup races and all of that sort of stuff, which probably don't fall under the same banner. So you've got to work that out. So there's going to be an element of self-funding this next trip as well, even though you're there for the Olympics.
I'll still be spending a fair bit of time off tour, so that's self-funded still. So it'll be challenging, but it's do it every year, so it's nothing different.
Well, let's hope that somebody out there listening is looking at the podcast and listening and thinking to themselves, I can make a difference for Tristan maybe, and maybe some of the other paddlers that are go on tour with you from Australia, because there's a few, isn't there? You've got a good group of core pals that you hang around with and travel with and motivate each other. So I think it's good for that as well. So, and
if there is anyone listening, it's a two-way street. We can do stuff for you as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, come on the podcast and we have, just so that you going on from that, Tristan and his teammates from last year came in and had a chat with our team at Aintree Group as well and talked us through all of the ins and outs of how things worked for you. So I think it's a good opportunity for businesses to be able to have an athlete come in, or anybody that they sponsor, to talk about how life is outside of sitting at a desk and a computer every day. So it is a good opportunity. So I recommend.
Yeah. We have stuff to offer.
Yes, indeed. Have you got any other questions?
I had a really serious question.
Okay, go on. Is it about what sort of music do you listen to, Tristan?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute. What's the most boats you've been able to put on the top of a boat, top of a car?
There could very
think
well
I've-
be social media that will tell us the story, but
I think I've done 6 before, 6
Okay.
or 7, yeah, which is a lot. Yeah, That's a
Yeah.
challenging
yeah.
engineering feat. That
Yes.
I think as a result of that question, Chelsea, when you're listening back to this, just pop a photo somewhere of how many boats you can fit on the top of a car and what it means, because I'm not sure that people will understand what putting 6 boats on the roof of a car actually would look like from a...
especially when it's because we got big 4-wheel drives here, but when
Yeah.
you go to Europe, they've only got like little hatches. It's quite funny to see the boats stacked up bigger than the car is itself.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And making sure they're nice and tight.
Yeah,
on
making
there.
sure they're not
They
gonna
don't
fall off.
go
I'm sure
flying
there's
anywhere.
probably situations where you're like the clearance is probably a bit of a worry too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my in-depth question. Yeah. But now on to the next part. So obviously there's you as an athlete, but then there's downtime as well.
Yeah.
So what do you do in your downtime?
I enjoy cinematography as well and film. So I enjoy making my own videos and film, and I have a lot of fun doing that. And again, going back to the inspiring and the kids, it makes me, really happy and fulfilled, and it makes me enjoy it more when I come home and all the kids are like, oh, this new video, it's so good.
Yeah.
So that keeps me going with that, and that takes up a fair bit of my downtime as well.
Yeah.
And I play guitar, I play pool,
Yeah.
so that takes up more
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
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 So if I'm not training, which takes up most of the day, I'm usually doing pretty low key stuff at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of training, how many hours a day would you train on average?
It depends on the block. So if we've got like a hard block and an easy block. In a hard block, which I was just in, it's usually about anywhere between 3 or 4 hours a day, which is quite a lot. And then as we get closer to racing, we do the easier blocks, which are usually 1 to 3 hours a day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And life after the Olympics. So what's your goals or objectives after
Poor
the Olympics?
Tristan.
Yeah.
No pressure at all.
Well,
That
I
was a
don't
damn
study or
question.
anything.
Yeah.
I haven't really found anything that particularly inspires me to go to uni yet, which I'm okay with.
Yep.
But I've at least committed till LA 2028, so
Right.
I'm still going to be doing another 4 years, another Olympic cycle. Apart from that, I don't really think that far ahead, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's fair
I
enough.
take
Yeah,
it day by
exactly.
day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that I'll be doing this for another 4 years.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'll probably just continue to do what I'm doing, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we've talked about this a lot with our guests on this podcast as well as our other podcast, but going to uni is not an every person thing. And,
No.
We're very much of the opinion that it's not the university part of things is not the most important part of life.
Yeah.
And it certainly isn't for everyone. Most people that we talk to have said, I didn't go to uni, or I did, but then I decided to do something different anyway. And I think it's just one of those things where as long as what you're doing inspires you every day and, you've got a reason to keep going and be motivated and whatever, it doesn't really matter what it is. And tomorrow it could be different. You'll get to the Olympics this time, get the focus on getting to the next Olympics, and then in the meantime 1,000 other things will happen, and life will keep going. And it's just just the motivation to be an athlete, I think, is like, we shouldn't minimize the fact that you say, I haven't gone to uni yet. That actually doesn't matter, because what you've done is incredible. We know that it's, the mental preparation and the physical preparation that you have to put yourself through would not have been any different if you had have gone to uni. It's like some people like uni and some people don't. And I know some of the paddlers you were talking about who are at uni and they're like up at 2 a.m. overseas doing an online lecture and stuff like that. And I
Time
don't know.
zones make that
Yeah,
challenging,
exactly. But it's just, the motivation to be a professional athlete is an incredible motivation on its own, and it doesn't need to be done in conjunction with anything else. It can just be done. Unfortunately for you, it's just a matter of like the 5 months away every year means that life is kind of topsy-turvy a bit, isn't it? So,
yeah, it's a bit very free-spirited. Yes.
Yeah.
Living a very free-spirited life.
But what you've been able to achieve and what the outcome of that is pretty special.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's something you should cherish and we should all acknowledge.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
100%,
Yeah,
I think that's,
definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that. That it's the personalities are different, and I've never been academically minded, so uni didn't really interest me that much. But I just think there's like 100 different avenues to get to the same place.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And uni's just one of those
Yeah,
avenues.
exactly.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we'll finish with the inspiring conversation around, you know, what you've done to get to where you are, Olympic athlete. It was a hard road to get there. Hard road to keep going as well, because there's still so much ahead of you between now and when the actual Olympics happen. But we're really proud of you, Tristan.
Yeah,
thank you.
So congratulations and good luck. And we're going to be cheering for you.
It means a
Literally,
lot,
we will be there. We'll be there cheering.
Yeah,
so.
the cheer squad. We'll be watching physically there, watching you go down.
We can't watch on the TV anymore because we just get too stressed. So we're going to have to be there.
That's like my parents too.
Emily was in Europe. She's in Europe at the moment, so she was watching daytime. Like it was nighttime for her. It was daytime here for us because we were. She was awake at like 2 a.m. watching you. So she will also be there. And we'll all be screaming very loudly. So. It's very exciting.
I just hope I can do everyone proud.
No, you already have.
Everyone and my country proud.
You already
That's
have.
What I want to do.
Have.
It's awesome. So congratulations. Well done. And we look forward to the next chapter.
Yeah.
So do I.
It's awesome. Thanks, Tristan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.